And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of MLS History Retold on the Designated Players and MLS Podcast. This week, it's playoff time yet again. The 2009 playoffs were one to remember specifically for fans of the Fire and Real Salt Lake. First, we'll chat about that Chicago series comeback against the Revolution, followed by a detailed retelling of the 2009 MLS Cup. I'm Andrew, that's Connor, and this is MLS History Retold. What's good, buddy? I didn't mess that one up this time. No cuts, no edits. That's gonna be clean.
Yeah, but the other episodes we have plenty of cuts and edits, so
What
it's
are you talking?
about time. It only
I
took
don't
you
know what you're
three
talking about.
episodes.
I
You
never
already
edit.
broke the fourth wall. You already
I
said we're recording
literally,
four today.
I never edit anything ever. Actually, I just
Yeah,
take it and
it
post it.
shows. It shows.
How
We
are
can
you?
tell.
How are you?
I'm tired. I want to be
Yeah, you
done.
cranky. Need a little nappy nap, huh?
Yeah, someone needs to give me my what is it? The pacifier. Wah.
Oh man.
What an
Well,
intro to the episode.
before we get into a score for the week, let's make sure that we tell everybody give us a follow and a like and go tell friends about how great our pod is and all that good stuff because we are pushing for more and more subscribers because we are massive. Very,
Yeah,
very massive.
make sure to hit share and then more, and then share with the first person that pops up.
There you go. Connor knows what's good. Um,
Yeah,
well, now that we've done that, because that's a new part of the show is asking people to subscribe like we are proper influencers.
professional
Yeah,
YouTubers.
proper influencers. Now we go to something that we've done all the time. Scarf of the week. What do you got? I wonder.
I've got RSL, which you can't even see
Whoa.
on the side because we're talking about RSL today. Or I'm talking about RSL today.
I almost was talking
Ugh.
about RSL.
Well, good thing you're not, because the RSL fans specifically asked for me to cover this story.
Yeah, whatever. You cover most of their stories actually. I don't think I've gotten many RSL stories.
Yeah, I mean
Usually,
that kind of speaks facts to how bad they've been so far.
well, it usually ties into a an episode that has something to do with Red Bull, which is why because I think every time you have a story, I've got a Red Bull story.
What else is new? Way too many Red Bull stories in this list. Imagine
Actually,
my
not enough.
surprise.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut this part, but fun fact, I was getting ready to go to sleep last time. You know, what would be a really good book on like coinciding with MLS history would be That's So Metro. Just a retelling of every That's So Metro moment in book form.
That's a you project. That is
That's
it.
an that's an everybody project. We all need to contribute to that.
Absolutely not.
Well, I mean, listen, we're out here, we're chatting about the playoffs, right? Something that Red Bull have not missed in 14 years, and what? Atlanta's only made twice in the last five, something like that.
And
Yeah.
still got more cups than you.
Yeah, but we don't care about that on this pod. We are Shield
That's
truthers
not what you said.
until what do you
Roll the
mean?
clip. Roll the clip.
No. Yeah, so we'll just dive right into it here. I don't think we have time for any fancy edits or anything like that. We're just gonna go jump into start off with the Chicago Fire against the New England Revolution in the first round of the 2009 playoffs. And it's interesting because in 2009, the Chicago Fire were looking to get back into the graces of some of the best teams in the league. They had multiple second place finishes and third place finishes in the East, but they hadn't won anything since 2006 US Open Cup. However, led by Mexican superstar Cuauhtemoc Blanco and surrounded with talented players like Brian McBride, Marco Papa, Logan Paws, CJ Brown, and friend of the pod John Bush, they were hoping that 2009 was the year to change that. Hopes were high after a brilliant start that saw them go unbeaten in 12 before losing four straight, including a U.S. Open Cup match to the Wilmington Hammerheads. They would then bounce back quickly, only losing four of their next 16 to round out the year in second in the East and become one of the three Eastern Conference teams to make the postseason. Sadly, New York Red Bull decided that competing with them was a bad idea, and they decided instead to put up a historically terrible season, top three worst performances in league history. More on that never. May that season rest in torture. Anyways, their first round opponents would be the New England Revolution, a team full of familiar faces with the likes of many stars already covered in this series. Taylor Twellman to a degree, although he had not been very much featured in the team. Steve Ralston, Jay Heaps, Jeff Lorenowitz, Chris Tierney, Michael Parkhurst, Shalry Joseph, and Matt Reese, just to name a few. Also a team that had tons of playoff history with the Fire up to this point. In 2009, this team had met in almost every MLS Cup playoff since the Fire joined in 1998. They would travel first to Gillette Stadium to kick off the 2009 MLS playoffs, and after a red hot start to their season, the Fire would waste no time in continuing that momentum. In front of a packed 7,500 fans, they scored 17 minutes into the game through Chris Rolfe, who fired a right-footed shot into the top right corner of Matt Reese's goal to give Chicago a 1-0 lead. The Fire were burning bright until the Revs doused their flame just before halftime. Oh yeah, we got fire puns. A free kick was awarded to New England after a CJ Brown foul. Abdoulaye Mansali strikes the ball into the box from the right side and finds the head of Emmanuel Osei, who nods it past John Bush to level the score with the final touch before the halftime whistle. In this two-legged affair, that was the first quarter of the match. We've used that terminology a lot when talking about playoffs, but having the lead going into leg two meant everything. So both teams fought very, very hard to gain that advantage. Chicago controlled the play, winning the majority of corner kicks during the match in the second half, keeping the pressure on, which of course means that in MLS terms, they were about to concede because no team in control ever wins. And win, they did not. New England would find the lead in the 75th minute off of a corner played in by Mauricio Castro to find the noggin of Pat Phelan. His header is saved and parried by John Bush, but eventually finds his way to Shalrie Joseph, whose right-footed effort finds the bottom corner and gives New England the 2-1 lead. This is how the match would end, and the trip back to Toyota Park a week later meant that it was the Fire who needed to win by at least one goal to get to extra time, or two or more goals to win and move on to the conference finals outright. Toyota Park was packed out with 21,500 fans, and the match kicked off, and the race to the finals were on. The game was cagey and scrappy, highlighted when New England player Abdoulaye Mansali saw yellow for an off-the-ball shoulder charge into the chest of Fire DP Cuauhtemoc Blanco just 17 minutes into the match, setting the tone. 4 minutes later, it was New England who would get on their first real chance of the match with Jankowskis ringing a header off of John Bush's crossbar and out. Then in the 35th minute, it was John Thorrington to find the breakthrough. After clever interplay with Blanco and Papa on the right-hand side, the ball was cut back to a wide-open Thorrington on the penalty spot, who tucked it into the bottom right corner for the 1-0 lead. From here, it was all things Fire all the time. More chippy fouls from New England are rewarded with yellow cards, and Papa is denied brilliantly by Reese as New England try to get into the break, only down one. They're able to do so, and in the last quarter of the two-legged tie, it is anyone's game to win. New England would start the half just as it left off the first one, with strong challenges on Marco Papa and Cuauhtemoc Blanco, raising the temperature of this match, if you will. The Fire were pushing hard with the energy of Toyota Park behind them, chances being cleared off the line and saved by Matt Reese. They were inching ever closer to the goal that would put them in the conference finals. Then in the 68th minute, Mauricio Castro and Marco Papa came together, with Castro from New England being sent into the ad boards. No foul is given, and Castro was clearly visibly frustrated. So much so that when the ball falls to him after a misplaced pass, instead of controlling it and giving it to his teammate, he blasts it as hard as he can into the stands, hitting a fan. He walks up to the referee, showing him blood on his hand, and was sent off the field. But it wasn't for a red card offense, which it very easily should have been, but it was to get treatment from the medical staff. He was subbed off shortly after that. And a quick check confirms that, shockingly, he was not, nor ever has been, a member of the New York Red Bulls, confirming that this sort of thing does not only happen to our players. However, he did not try to apologize to the fans, meaning that we were not graced with his ceremonious scarfing like our friend Drew Yearwood did. Certainly rattled and feeling the pressure, New England sunk in, absorbed the nonstop onslaught of the Fire attack. Shot after shot, kept out by combinations of Matt Reese's gloves, Revolution defenders, and the crossbar. Then, in the 83rd minute, the breakthrough. Patrick Nyarko presses high and wins the ball off the New England defender at the goal line in front of Matt Reese. He cuts it inside and goes around a diving Matt Reese, megs a second defender in the box as the ball falls to the foot of Cuauhtemoc Blanco. He takes a touch around the challenge and rifles it into the top right-hand corner, peels off, jumps the ad boards, and celebrates with the Fire fans in the corner of the stadium. That goal put them 1 foot into the conference finals with 7 minutes plus stoppage to play. All they had to do was hold on. New England would send a few more hopeful chances towards Bush's goal, all of which were dealt with ease, and after 5 minutes of extra time, the full time whistle went. The Chicago Fire fans and players erupted in celebration. The two-legged comeback was complete, and they had their place in the Eastern Conference semifinals against none other than the focus of our next story, the Real Salt Lake. The Real Salt Lake. What happened in that game? Stick around to find out.
Wow, it's like you led right. You're like transitioning already right into my story. Should we just skip the normal chit chat up there?
Go right ahead.
Just jump right into the story?
Go right ahead.
Wow, look at this. A DP pod first. All right. Well, Andrew kind of hinted at it already, but I'm going to cover the story of Real Salt Lake. And I will eventually get to the point that Andrew was hinting at, where we will talk about Real Salt Lake against Chicago in the playoffs. But we got a lot of stuff to talk about before we get to that point. And so normally when I cover my stories, my history stories, I try to come up with some kind of a good opener, get the fans engaged, get them excited before we dive into the story. But for this week, none of that. All I ask is that you go to youtube.com, look up the 2009 MLS Cup Real Salt Lake versus LA Galaxy on the Major League Soccer channel, go to the 2 second mark, and bask in the glory of our soccer Lord and Savior. So if you can remember all the way back to episode 175, we had covered RSL's first ever win. But a lot of that episode was also covering just how bad RSL was in their first ever MLS season. Their inaugural season was in 2005, which in terms of you listening to this now was ages ago. But for the 2009 RSL squad, it was not too far removed. The team is coming off a much better season in 2008 than they did in their first season in 2005. So momentum for them is moving in the right direction. The team also looks completely different from its first ever roster, with a combination of big names and players looking to make a name for themselves, such as Javi Mo, Jamison Olave, and Kyle Beckerman. Were they poised to continue the momentum forward and challenge for the Shield? Or were they headed in the opposite direction and set to miss the playoffs? Well, the start of the season seemed more like the former, as in the month of April, they won 3 of their 4 games to get them off to a great start. May, however, would see the team look much more like the latter of that earlier question. And if you've listened to past history episodes, you know this is normal. Teams have these ebbs and flows all the time, and the ebbs and flows would continue for RSL throughout the season, with really neither ebb or flow lasting for too long. I won't get into the details of the rest of the season, but what we do need to talk about is this final day race, because if we're keeping it PG girly in this podcast, holy guacamole. Someone may have to correct me on this because in typical MLS fashion, it was hard to follow. But I think the playoffs were determined by the top 2 teams from each conference automatically qualifying. And then the next 6 teams with the best record, regardless of conference, also qualified. So basically, the top 8 teams, regardless of conference, unless there was some freak instance where one conference was infinitely worse than the other. So going into the final game week, RSL is in 12th place, meaning they would somehow need to jump up 4 spots on decision day in order to just make the playoffs. Lucky for them, this is one of the closest races I have ever seen. The following teams were in reach for RSL, who was on 37 points going into the final game week. Colorado on 40 points, Dallas on 39 points, DC on 39 points, Toronto on 39 points, and New England on 39 points. Another factor working in their favor was that their final game was against Colorado. So they were at least able to control the destiny of one team that they could lead. RSL fans didn't have to worry too much about their own team doing what was needed, as they would dismantle Colorado 3-0, which was significant because it gave them the advantage in the goal difference. So now they've officially moved up at least one place. The problem is that they still needed a lot of help to get in. New England was not one of those teams that helped them, as they would go on to qualify for the playoffs after beating the Shield champions Columbus Crew. Outside of New England, though, the luck was pouring in. Toronto would get smacked by bottom of the table RBNY 5-0, which left them on 39 points and not even in tiebreaker contention. The same was true for Dallas, who lost to the New Boys in Seattle to see them finish on 39 points as well. The last team left who RSL needed to leapfrog was DC United, who was coming up against the KC Wiz, who, mind you, were completely eliminated from the playoffs at this point. DC was down 1-0 at the half, before turning it around to take a 2-1 lead in the 82nd minute with a goal from Julius James and an earlier goal scored by Jaime Moreno. They didn't know this at the time because some of the other games had not been played yet, but if this result holds, RSL are eliminated. Sure enough, stoppage time rolls around. DC has still held on to their lead. It's looking bleak for RSL, but out of nowhere, they find hope. Right as stoppage time begins, KC has a corner. The ball is whipped in and nobody can claim it. As the ball rattles around, it eventually finds the foot of Roger Espinosa, who hits a shot at goal. But in the way of him and the game tying goal is Brazilian center mid Fred. No, not the one that played for Manchester United, a different one. Fred on the goal line blocks the ball from going in, but does so with his arm, meaning that in stoppage time, we've got a red card and a penalty with a chance for KC to tie it up. Up steps Claudio Lopez, who hits a powerful shot through the middle to beat Cronin and tie the game. Elation for RSL fans and devastation for DC fans. Here's the thing, though. The game isn't over yet. There were 4 minutes of stoppage time, and there was a lot of time lost to the red card and penalty. So they play on after the penalty is scored by KC, and DC, in a last minute scramble to find a winner, finds the ball on the foot of Rodney Wallace, whose first effort with the left foot is blocked. The ball lands and finds its way to the right foot of Wallace now, who rifles one from the edge of the box and watches as it pings off the bar and comes out, near inches away from finding a winner down a man in extra time. Absolutely insane scenes. That would be their last effort, and they would drop points at the last minute to finish the season with 40 points. This meant that RSL Colorado and DC were tied on 40 points with only one playoff spot left. RSL had the head to head tiebreaker with DC and had the goal difference tiebreaker on Colorado as the two were tied on head to head. This meant after all of that, somehow, some way, RSL snuck into the playoff spot after being in 12th place heading into the final game week. So all of this, we're only now getting into the playoffs, which is where the real story is about. So RSL pulled off the miracle and got into the last playoff spot. But what that also meant was they were going up against the 2008 MLS Cup champions and the current season Shield champions. That's going to be a very difficult task. The conference semifinals are a home and away best on aggregate. Game one takes us to Sandy, Utah, as RSL play host, refed by my co-host's favorite referee. That's right, it's a Geiger show. This game was looking very much like it was going to be a 0-0 game and a good result for Columbus, about to head back to Ohio. But right when you start to doubt RSL, they slap you silly and prove you wrong. In the 88th minute, Robbie Finley finds a game-winning goal, meaning now RSL has the advantage going to Columbus and has the momentum, but still a tough task ahead. And a tough task it proved to be, as in the 35th minute, a GBS brace meant that not only were RSL down in this game, but in the aggregate as well. However, it would not take long for RSL to respond back, as in the 37th minute, Javi Mo would score to make it 2-1 in the game and 2-2 in aggregate. More work to be done, but some hope again. In stoppage time of the first half, a penalty for RSL gave them an opportunity to take the aggregate lead into the half, and that's exactly what they did with Finley scoring the goal. RSL just have to see it out at this point, but they do their fans one better, as Andrew Williams gets an insurance goal in the 74th minute to give them the lead in this game and make the aggregate 4-2. RSL would see it out to keep the MLS Cup dream alive. And now we pick it up to the point where Andrew had left us off. So we're going to see the conference final game between the Chicago Fire and RSL. And from here on out, it's just one game to decide who moves on, which means if it's tied after 90, it's extra time. And then if it's still tied after extra time, it's penalties. Buckle up. We're in for a barn burner. Just kidding. This game was 0-0 after 120 minutes. So here's the list of things that could have been done instead of watching this game. Build a puzzle, cook and eat a meal, touch grass. Okay, maybe not the last one. The meaningful part of this game is the penalty shootout. The first round of shots are both makes by Blanco and Mathis for either side. The Chicago Fire version of Brian McBride, who we covered in a recent MLS history episode, scores his goal, but Javi Mo misses his, giving Chicago the lead. The next round would be goals from both sides, with Condé and Finley scoring. Not many chances left for RSL to save their chances at MLS Cup, but this team loves to come through in tough moments. John Thornton steps up for Chicago, and his shot is saved, meaning that if Beckerman scores his, we're back level now, which he did. The next round would see both shooters score in Brown and Johnson. The next round after that would be matching again, but in the opposite direction, as both takers in pause and as Espindola would miss, meaning we're on to round 7 of the shootout. Brandon Prideaux would step up for Chicago and see his shot saved. RSL with a chance to go to the MLS Cup final now. Their fate in the hands of Ned Grabavoy, who would step up and make no mistake playing the hero as he would score to send this improbable RSL team to the MLS Cup final. RSL was one step away from an improbable MLS Cup win, but in their way was one of the greatest MLS dynasties of all time, the LA Galaxy. For those that don't know what the team looked like, it has Landon Donovan, David Beckham, and most importantly, our USMNT hero, Greg Berhalter. This Galaxy team was also coached by arguably the greatest MLS coach of all time, Bruce Arena. Unquestionably a tough task ahead, but RSL is the team to make the impossible possible. Galaxy would be the first on the board, as in the 41st minute, the Galaxy would be on the break with Beckham on the ball. Just how you want it if you're a Galaxy fan. He plays it out wide for Donovan, who weighs his options and then hits a cross back post for the trailing and unmarked Mike McGee. The perfect pass finds the foot of McGee, who taps it in the cross to give the Galaxy the lead. Right out of the half, RSL gets a huge chance as Robbie Finley finds himself one-on-one with Donovan Ricketts, who comes up with a big save, but at the cost of his body, as Ricketts would close down Finley and collide. Both players would stay down for some time, but would ultimately stay in the game. Before that happens, though, in the 64th minute, Finley and Movsisyan find themselves solo against 3 or 4 Galaxy defenders. But as they have all season, the MLS gods were shining down on RSL. And while Movsisyan's shot was blocked, it fell perfectly to the foot of Finley, who had an open goal and made no mistakes to level the score. The aforementioned injury to Ricketts would prove to be too much, as in the 66th minute, Ricketts would be substituted out for Josh Saunders, who would have to see out the rest of the game. The rest of the half was uneventful, meaning this 1-1 game was going to extra time. In the extra time, both teams would have a few chances, but nothing too threatening, which means we are off to penalties to decide the MLS Cup champion of 2009. Beckham would start things off by sending Ramondo the wrong way and scoring the first pen. Mathis would do the same for RSL to see the scores leveled after 1. Greg, with infinite G's and infinite balls, would put his pen side netting past the diving Ramondo. In the same fashion as round 1, Finley would again match his counterpart and score top corner past the diving Saunders. Round 3 would see Jovan Kirovski's shot saved by Ramondo, giving RSL a chance to create an advantage. Beckerman would have the chance to do so, but despite a decent pen, Saunders dives to make a fantastic save and keep things level. Donovan was next for the Galaxy, and in the spirit of his team's name, would send his shot into the Galaxy, as the ball would fly over the crossbar. RSL again with a chance to take the lead. Up stepped Grabavoy, who would get Saunders going the wrong way to give RSL the lead. McGee was next, needing a goal to keep the Galaxy alive, and that's exactly what he did, sending Ramondo the wrong way. RSL was still in the driver's seat, needing just 1 goal here to win MLS Cup. Andy Williams steps up and sees a weak attempt saved by Saunders, meaning round 6, here we come. Chris Klein and Chris Winger share both a first name and also a goal in round 6 of this penalty shootout. Round 7 would see Edson Buttles step up and see a poor penalty attempt saved by Ramondo, giving RSL yet another chance to win the cup. This time it would be Robbie Russell with the chance to win it. He steps up and he sends Saunders the wrong way, putting the shot bottom corner and winning MLS Cup for RSL. One of the most improbable MLS Cup victories in MLS history, probably even to this day. So many steps along the way looked like their season would be done, but every single time they pulled it out, either by luck, skill, or maybe even a combination of both. No matter how you chalk it up, RSL are in the record books as MLS Cup champions.
I think I mentioned this to you when we were prepping it, but there's somebody who was in there that into our comments after our top 10 MLS Cup final video, and they were like, I can't believe you didn't put this one, higher than you did. And I remember I watched back the clips and the highlights, and I was like, yeah, You're not wrong. We didn't sell that one very well. Yeah, absolute scenes, right? I mean, most improbable to that point for sure. That Galaxy team was supposed to be, I mean, miles clear of everybody, and they stuck with them to the end.
I can't believe that ending, like that last game week for the 2009 regular season. Insane. Like, how do you have like six teams all within like 3 points of each other? That's complete chaos.
Well, that's still early MLS days, really. That's still what, a couple of what was that, 15, 16 teams at that point?
I have it up. I
2009?
could check.
Yeah.
15. Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes a little bit of sense, but it's still crazy comparative to everything, right? You don't have really your haves and have-nots like you do now. Um, very,
The whole
very
thing is the whole thing is tight. Like this has to be one of the closest tables I've ever seen. I mean, between first and 12th is a 10-point gap. Like the Crew won the supporter shield on less than 50 points. That's got to be like one of the worst supporter shield victories in the history of the league.
easily, easily. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed our look back at the 2009 playoffs for MLS history retold. We are pushing on. We got a couple of good ones coming up here. Do we dare spend just one whole episode diving into the Benny Ball?
Can you fit that in one episode? Is
So
that
that
even
might need to be a
possible?
whole. It's its own series spinoff. Benny Ball
Oh
spinoff.
God, not another spin-off series.
Um, yeah, we're going to talk about Rihanna's parking lot party before the Red Bulls' first game as New York Red Bulls. That'll be fun. I think I have the date wrong on that, but we'll cover it anyway because that looks fun. Then Philly's in the mix. Philly joins us for the first time, and we'll be covering a whole bunch of their stuff, including Sons of Ben and how they basically brought the club to Philly. And then Latu's hat trick in his first ever game. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, stick around and we'll be telling it. And you can give us some other things that you might want to see, and we'll let you know if it's on our list. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcast. You know when it next goes live. And then make sure you follow us wherever you get social media so you know when we are posting clips and stuff. You can interact with us because that's what we like to do. So thanks again, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.